This is the narrated PowerPoint on Chapter 3, Learning to Construct and Interact with an Audience, from Dorothy Windsor's Writing Like an Engineer. So this is the opening paragraph from Chapter 3, and it's quite a bombshell. But I mean that in a good way. Here, Windsor takes us along a well-worn path in technical communication, audience. Every technical communication book that you encounter is going to have something about audience in it, typically a chapter. And perhaps even more. Windsor talks about audience in terms of her case's expectations for what they've been led to believe should be their relationship as engineers to their audience. And she contrasts this with how remarkably complex it actually is, at least from how they expected it to be. I'd like to talk about some of the theoretical background on audience and then relate that theory to how it plays out in risk communication, and then come back and show how this plays out in the text. Now, there's a concept up here at the top, the social construction of knowledge, and this is a theoretical concept that first appears in the 1962 publication of Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. The Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and that's from which I also took the paragraph below, which is published and maintained by Stanford University's Department of Philosophy, and it's one of the best philosophy departments in the United States, called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, the most influential philosophical book of the 20th century. And it's still an idea, the ideas there are still directing how we think about science and so forth here in the 21st century as well. This idea of knowledge being socially constructed, it has applications in all fields, everywhere. Whether you're talking about carpentry or psychology or biology, but it's this idea that any type of disciplinary knowledge is not created by an individual, but by people working together. You may have heard, for example, that Albert Einstein invented the atomic bomb or created the atomic bomb. And then I hope you heard later that that is incorrect. He did not invent the atomic bomb. What he did was some of his research, other scientists were able to take, other physicists, and use to create atomic weapons. Specifically the theory of relativity, that E equals mc squared, or mass times the speed of light squared. And what that meant was it was possible for there to be a tremendous amount of energy unlocked from a substance like uranium under the correct conditions, and that did bring about the development of atomic weaponry. But this quote here that I took from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, it also makes some room for my area of research, which is rhetoric of science. And that's this interpretation of Kuhn is typically telling us that scientists develop their work from accepted models until there is a revolution of some sort, a scientific revolution. And then what we are left with, we're often left with the residue of former models. And all that is because of the way in which science takes place, the way that it happens, the way that it is the result of the effort of a group of people and not just an individual. So, for example, Consider what these images tell us about the structure of the atom. The first two, the ones in the upper left and upper right hand corner, this is basically internet clip art. The one in the middle is from the Atomic Energy Commission that was developed right after World War II. So that takes us back a little bit further. But what they all three suggest is that the subatomic particles are in regular orbits around the nucleus of the atom. Well, consider this. However, on the other hand, we know from the Heisenberg uncertainty principle that not only are the subatomic particles not in regular orbits, but only predictable in terms of their location, but we also know that attempting even to locate them affects their location. Did we just learn this? No, we learned it in 1927. But the point is that the idea of subatomic particles being in orbit around the nucleus, that's still a metaphor that's in use. And all of this just simply points to the collaborative nature of science. And of course, we see the same sort of thing in engineering, and in a sense also the way in which other physicists took Albert Einstein's work and applied it to create atomic weaponry is similar to the relationship between science and engineering. Okay, so let's try to bring this a little further down to earth and talk about risk communication. Okay, risk communication sounds about like what it is, and that is the attempt to communicate something that is risky or hazardous to a group of people. Usually it's a corporation or it's a government agency trying to communicate with people. Like, for example, if you had an Atomic Energy Commission, they might want to communicate with people about the atomic energy plant and how the water around it might seem like a nice lake, but it's actually used for cooling the plant, and so not a good place to fish, especially. Or other types of health hazards, like with smoking or what have you. So anyway, here's a definition of risk communication from the Environmental Protection Agency. And some technical communication scholars have actually criticized it as being arhetorical. Arhetorical. What happens when you add the word a as a prefix to a word? Well, it means that it's not rhetorical. It means it sets up something that's more like a technocratic situation. But we're going to talk about these three styles of technical communication, and then we're going to come back in and they do also define relationships with audience and see how they apply to the reading that you've done in chapter 3. So anyway, the three communication styles are technocratic, one-way Jeffersonian, interactive Jeffersonian, and social constructionist. And I'd like for you to have these. So what it would be a good idea for you at this point to pause the video and then hit your print screen button, which is on a PC keyboard. It's to the left of to the right of F12, and then you can open up a Word document and click on paste, and you should be able to see this screen, and then you'll at least have access to these terms. You can also get the other definitions of these terms. That's what we're getting ready to do on the next slides, but I just want you to have access to these four terms, because we're going to apply them in just a minute. Okay, so technocratic is typically a lot of communication between scientific and engineering communities and the general public takes this form. the scientific community or the engineering community releases information. They may have a public relation officer, whether at the estate or working for a corporation, to release it to the press for publication. And of course, one of the problems is there's no appropriate role for public participation or oversight. The second is one-way Jeffersonian. This is the Jeffersonian refers to Thomas Jefferson, and you notice what the difference is. What Jefferson is saying here is, well, if we don't feel that the people know enough about a situation to make an intelligent decision, then we need to, and it's the last word there, educate them. Or it's education, but educate them is what Jefferson is advocating there. Okay. So that's getting a little bit better. And then the latter two, the difference between that and the interactive Jeffersonian, if you notice here, the public communicates its values, beliefs, and emotions to technical experts. Thus, while the public adjusts to expert knowledge, experts adjust to public sentiments. What does that mean? It means that the experts have to respect the emotional responses of the public. And an example of that I've read was had to do actually with pollution in the Great Lakes, and the people who were being receiving communication about it. Some of them were coming to these public hearings and saying, "Well, my child died of cancer, and I really have to wonder if my child died of cancer because of this pollution in the lakes." And so the point was that the experts had to take that into account when they responded. Okay, and finally is the social constructivist, and this is what we're aiming for in terms of communication between science and engineering groups and the general public. Okay. Key phrase in this one is a little past the middle. Or in the middle, it says, "Thus the distinction between expert and public begins to blur." And then the last sentence, "Through this process, public policy decisions are socially constructed." So what does this mean? Well, it means that the public is involved with writing public policy. Okay, now I'm going to test you on your knowledge a little bit. The strange case of the piping plovers. Okay, so these are some birds, and we see them sometimes here along the Atlantic coast. They also fly inland to the Great Lakes too. And this was in a town on Lake Erie, and the problems they were having was that people were shooting them because they thought that they were ruining their fishing somehow. And so there's this endangered species manager for the EPA writes a letter stating that anyone caught shooting an endangered piping plover will be fined $500 per bird. Now, what type of risk communication is this? If you say technocratic, you're right. We just have an expert sending information to an audience. In this case, the expert is actually threatening the audience with action. Okay, here's another one. We have another EPA endangered species manager, And what this person does is to send an article to the local newspaper from Monroe, Michigan, and the article explains how the environment will suffer if people keep shooting piping plovers. So what's going on here? If you say one-way Jeffersonian, you'd be right. So what this manager is trying to do is to change the behavior, and this is rhetoric in action, right, of people by trying to educate them and using the newspaper as a way to get his message to the people. We have yet another one. Endangered species manager wants to set up a meeting with the people of Monroe, Michigan, to explain why it is important not to shoot the piping plovers. The EPA manager hopes to learn why people keep shooting the birds. What would you say this is? Interactive Jeffersonian. What makes it that? Well, this manager is setting up a meeting and hopes to learn why the people are having this response. And of course, this is an emotional response. It's different from a parent with a child that has died, but it's still, it's kind of the opposite in a sense. It's a kind of an angry response to the birds. And then finally, we have this one. To write policy regarding the piping plover, an endangered species manager for the EPA schedules a meeting open to anyone who lives near Monroe, Michigan. If you say social constructionist, you would be right. What makes it social constructionist? Well, it's the involving of the people with writing policy. So. And perhaps a meeting like this, from a meeting like this, the EPA manager would learn that the people think that the birds are ruining their fishing, or something like that. And there are people in the Great Lakes who make a living from fishing. So. Okay, so let's come back to the text. How about Ted, first assigned to write manuals? Technocratic, one-way Jeffersonian, interactive Jeffersonian, or social constructionist? Yeah, bingo, I would say social constructionist. Why? Well, he's going out, he's meeting the people who are using them, observing a training session, seeing what kinds of questions that they have, and then he's going to put it together himself. So this is very good, by the way. It's a very different type. Some of you might have been involved in usability studies, and this is kind of an interesting take on it. It's not simply observing somebody doing something, but the creative documents, being engaged in putting together one of the machines, as well as observation of those who were doing it. Here's another one. We have Al, who acts out scenes in which he takes on the role of the audience. What would you say this would be? I can see arguments for social constructionists. I think what keeps me from going there is that he isn't actually with the people. But it isn't one-way Jeffersonian either, and I would say I don't even think it's technocratic either, though I could kind of see an argument for that as well. But I think he's trying a little harder than that in terms of identification. He's not actually with the people, so I can see someone having a problem with calling it even interactive Jeffersonian. But I don't know, it's just something that I like about it. it's certainly better than technocratic, and it isn't exactly one-way Jeffersonian either. And that's part of the problem with argument to start with, is that it's always more complicated than just saying, oh, ethos, pathos, logos. It's always more complicated than that. And here we have Ted writing a program that automates everything. Sorry, Ted, I'm going to have to go with technocratic here. When Ted actually presented this to the audience, he discovered they needed a lot more documentation written at a very simple level. So this instance of a technocratic approach failed, but it sounds like that the ultimate outcome, and again, looking at these types of scenarios, they're more complicated than these static presentations that we've been looking at. This approach is technocratic, but when he followed through on delivering it, and delivery is a part of rhetoric, right? It's one part of the canon of rhetoric. When he delivered it to his audience, he saw that he had more work to do, a good deal more work to do. Questions? I'll see you online.